Today's video will be a bit different. Today we will tell the story of the magical harp of the Irish mythical god Dagda. It will be told as a bedtime story. There will be no video, just pictures, so there is no need to watch. So sit back, relax, close your eyes, let all the worries of the world go away, and listen to the story of the Harp of Dadga. As always, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with your friends. Welcome to the Gael Scoil. The story of the Harp of Dadga. Long ago, the Tuatha Dé Danann, supernatural beings, blonde and blue-eyed and carrying heavy spears, came from the north to the land known as Ireland. When their king, Nuada, was injured in battle, a man called the Dagda became their new leader. Like his people, the Dagda possessed magical gifts learned in the northern lands, and though he could sometimes be oafish or silly, he was also a man of immense power and goodness. Among his many possessions were a magic club and a cauldron of abundance known as Undri. This cauldron was a bottomless source of life. Even more amazing than Undri was his magical harp. It was among the Dagda's most cherished possessions, made of oak and encrusted with jewels and gold. The harp held exquisite, commanding music. Simply by plucking its strings, the Dagda could create many wonders. He could put the seasons in order. When it was time to fight his enemies, the Dagda plucked the strings of that harp, and every warrior was instantly ready for battle, prepared to defend their people. It wasn't only a call to battle the Dagda could play on his harp. When his warriors returned from battles, the Dagda played the harp again. This time the magic soothed every wound. Men forgot their injuries and sorrows. They let every woe vanish in the mist. And the music of healing played. The warriors thought not of suffering, but of honor, and the love they had for their children and wives, and for their friends lost to battle. They remembered glory. They celebrated their king. Among the enemies of the Tuatha Dé Danann were the Hibernians, a people far different in every way. They had settled in Ireland before the coming of the Tuatha, and they had dark hair and dark eyes and carried spears of gold and bronze. The Tuatha Dé Danann and the Hibernians naturally went to war. One day, in the midst of a great battle, the Dagda's home was left unguarded. When some of the Hibernian chiefs and soldiers saw this was so, they decided to steal the magic harp. In this way, they thought, they would conquer the Tuatha Dé Danann. The moment they secured the harp, they knew they must run far away. So taking their wives and children along, they fled far from the battlefield. After they had traveled a long way, they came upon an abandoned banquet hall. Certain they would never be found here, they sat to celebrate their theft and enjoy the evening. Suddenly, in the middle of their feast, the doors to the banquet hall burst open, and there stood the Dagda, surrounded by his warriors. The Hibernian men instantly sprang to their feet, prepared to defend their great prize. "Come to me, harp," the Dagda cried. "Come to me, oak of two meadows, foursquare and true." Hearing its master's voice, the harp sprang from its place in the center of the banquet table and swept into the Dagda's waiting hands. Before anyone could say a word or do a thing, the Dagda swept his hands across the strings and played 3 long, solemn chords. The harp began to hum, and that sound reverberated in the great hallway. A wail, the magical music of tears. The sound was so piercing and sad, the women and children bent their heads, and soon they were weeping so hard they could not see nor stand. The men, seeing their families in such despair, felt their own hearts break, and they turned to comfort them, but the music had done its magic. The Fomorians reached for their spears, but before they could throw them, the Dagda once again touched his harp, and this time the notes of the chord that rose into the air were dense with mirth, and the warriors began to laugh uncontrollably. They could not help themselves. They laughed so hard their spears fell to the floor, and they dropped their goblets of wine so that wine spilled everywhere, staining their boots, staining the floor. They laughed until they had no strength left in their limbs, and still the chord sounded, filling the hall, filling their ears. The women, tears still in their eyes, turned to look at their laughing husbands and began to speak. But before they could utter a word, the Dagda touched his harp once more. This time, the music that rose into the air was soft and sweet, pure and good, as beautiful as joy itself. This was the music of sleep. All the Fomorians heard this sound, and no one could resist its force. The women bowed their heads and closed their eyes and fell asleep. The children crawled into their mothers' laps, curled up, and slept. The men could not stay standing. They dropped into their seats and nodded off, closing their eyes, one after another, until the only sound besides the music of sleep was the sound of their snores. When the Dagda was certain the Fomorians were fast asleep and unable to move, he motioned for his warriors to depart, and they stole away, taking the harp with them, of course. Eventually, aided by the might and magic of the Dagda's harp, the two at the dawn prevailed, saving Ireland from death and destruction by the Fomorians. But that is a story for another day.